Breaking news, you're looking at video of one of the last times Oscar winner Gene Hackman, a known recluse in recent years, was seen in public.
It's been nearly a week since Gene Hackman's body was discovered. This morning, while authorities have ruled out some scenarios, they still don't know what happened to Hackman and his wife.
Hackman's body was discovered this morning. While authorities have ruled out some possibilities, they still don't know what really happened to him and his wife, Gene Hackman, a Hollywood legend whose name evokes resilience, unparalleled talent, and a career that spanned decades, may have left behind more than just a cinematic legacy. His passing has uncovered a story so intricate and unexpected that even those closest to him are struggling to comprehend it. To the world, Hackman was an icon, a two-time Oscar winner who reshaped acting with his relentless dedication to his craft. But behind the glitz and glamour was a man whose personal life was far from peaceful. The final years of Gene Hackman's life were marked by wealth, secrecy, and a family torn apart by distance and unresolved pain.
It's weird because I knew a lot of them, so they weren't intimidating. Meeting Gene Hackman the first time, was like, but then finding out he was so funny, that was a great thing.
Yeah.
When I saw him, he did that speech in Birdcage where he just says that thing about, and the leaves. And at that point, you just slowly nod off. But he did it so, it's a hard thing to make boring hysterical. And he did it.
Yeah.
And he did it.
Imagine this, over $80 million in assets, a fortune meticulously hidden away in real estate investments and accounts so discreet that even his closest family members couldn't fully trace them. Yet, this wealth wasn't the gift it seemed to be. It wasn't a golden legacy passed down with love. Instead, it felt more like a curse, fueling tension, resentment, and endless questions. The money came with whispers of betrayal, unsent letters filled with regret, and a family unable to mend the vast divide left behind by its patriarch. Gene Hackman's public image was that of a resolute, hard-edged professional, a man known for his unwavering dedication. But in private, he was someone who had chosen isolation, perhaps to escape the very people he was meant to protect and nurture.
Much of the investigation is happening just up this road, behind gates and a guard, in an affluent neighborhood where homes are separated by acres of land. That's where Hackman and his wife chose to live, decidedly secluded.
Hackman's decision to disappear from Hollywood was as sudden as it was mysterious. After his final on-screen role in Welcome to Mooseport, 2004, he simply walked away. No farewell tour, no tearful interviews, no tell-all memoir. He exited, the limelight with the same intensity he brought to his roles, swift and decisive. "I've said everything I need to say," he remarked in a rare interview years later. But it wasn't just Hollywood he left behind. He seemed to abandon his public persona entirely. His retreat to Santa Fe, New Mexico in the 1980s, long before his official retirement, was the first glimpse of his desire for anonymity. Santa Fe provided the perfect escape for a man like Hackman, someone who rejected superficiality. The red earth, the whispering winds through the pines, the absence of paparazzi. It was a world far removed from Hollywood's relentless glare. Locals spoke of an old man pedaling his bicycle through the hills, his face weathered yet unmistakably sharp. It was a stark contrast to the tuxedo-clad figure who once commanded the red carpet, but it painted a picture of a man at peace. Or so it seemed.
I had the pleasure of working alongside Gene on two films, Unforgiven and Under Suspicion. And like everyone who's ever shared a scene with him, I learned he was a generous performer and a man whose gifts elevated everyone's work.
Yet, Hackman's retreat wasn't just about solitude. Whispers from those who crossed paths with him in his final years suggest that he was grappling with the weight of his own legacy. His name, immortalized in cinematic history, had also become a source of estrangement within his own family. His children from his first marriage to Faye Maltese carried the scars of a father who, while generous with his wealth, remained emotionally distant. His youngest daughter, Elizabeth, once reflected, "He was always somewhere else, physically, mentally, Fame consumed him, and there wasn't enough left for us. Her words cut to the heart of Hackman's complicated relationship with his children. Though he provided for them financially, he was largely absent during their formative years, leaving behind a void that no amount of success or fortune could ever fill.
Of legendary actor Gene Hackman and his wife Betsy Arakawa, the couple along with their dog found dead in their New Mexico home this week by a maintenance worker. Listen, this is part of the 911 call.
The divorce from Faye after 30 years of marriage wasn't just a personal failure. It was a turning point in Hackman's life. He later remarried Betsy Arakawa, a pianist 30 years his junior, and while their relationship was often described as peaceful, it did little to bridge the chasm between Hackman and his children. Family gatherings became rare, phone calls grew infrequent, and holidays like Christmas lost their meaning. For all his on-screen charisma, Hackman seemed either unable or unwilling to mend the emotional wounds within his family. He lived as though haunted by the fear of his children's disappointment, choosing instead to communicate through financial gestures that only widened the emotional divide. And then, there was the money. Hackman's wealth wasn't just a fact. It was a mystery. When his family began uncovering the full extent of his assets, they were stunned. At first, it seemed simple: a house in Santa Fe, a vintage Hudson Hornet, and a few modest accounts. But as they sifted through his meticulously organized papers, they discovered something far more complex: a labyrinth of investments, offshore, accounts, and shadowy transactions. Over the decades, Hackman had quietly built a financial empire, layered with so much anonymity that tracing it seemed nearly impossible. Shell companies, trust funds, and aliases were just a few of the tools he used to conceal his fortune. Every discovery led to more questions than answers. Why had he gone to such lengths to hide his wealth? And more importantly, why had he excluded his family from so much of it?
Right now we don't. Of course, we executed the search warrant yesterday, starting on the evening of the 26th, all into yesterday afternoon. And one of our investigators attended the autopsy yesterday. We don't have more information. We're trying to put things together, put together a timeline when the decedents were last seen or spoken to.
The most unsettling revelation was the existence of a shadow fund, something Hackman had quietly established in the mid-1990s. Cloaked in secrecy, the fund was described in his own handwritten notes with a cryptic phrase: built to leave control, not wealth. What did that mean? Was it a way to shield his fortune from his own family? Or was it a calculated move to maintain his grip on his legacy even after his death? Even more puzzling were the fund's beneficiaries. They weren't his children or close relatives, but rather an odd collection of individuals: a former assistant, a childhood friend, even a waiter from a small restaurant in Santa Fe. Strangers, not family, seemed to be at the center of Hackman's carefully constructed financial web. When his children uncovered this, it sent shockwaves through them. Was this a final act of betrayal? Or was there something deeper? A message they had yet to understand.
Deputies arrived and gained access to the residence where they observed Mrs. Arakawa deceased. They continued the search of their home and located Mr. Hackman in a separate area of the residence, also deceased. A German Shepherd was also found deceased, and 2 other dogs who appeared healthy were located on the property.
Hackman's Santa Fe home became the focal point of the family's search for answers. As they went through his belongings, they found more than just financial records. Hidden among his personal effects were unsent letters, some dating back decades. One letter, addressed to his son Christopher, read, "I know I failed as a father in ways I can't even articulate, but I've always believed I was doing what was best for you, even if it didn't seem that way." Another, written to Elizabeth, confessed, "I wanted to protect you from the chaos of my world, but I see now that I only created more chaos by keeping my distance." These unsent letters painted the picture of a man burdened with guilt and regret, someone who, despite his success, struggled to connect with the people who mattered most. But the letters weren't the only discovery. His diaries, found in his study, revealed an internal battle between the man the world saw and the man he felt he truly was. In one entry, he wrote, "Being Gene Hackman is both a gift and a curse. The world sees an icon, but I see a man who has failed in more ways than he has succeeded." Another entry, written during the filming of Crimson Tide, reflected on his strained relationship with his children. "I've been away too much, missed too many moments. I wonder if they'll ever forgive me, or if I'll ever forgive myself." Despite these deeply personal revelations, the family's attention shifted back to the financial mystery. The untouched shadow fund became a source of growing tension. Hackman's will made one thing clear: anyone who attempted to access the fund would forfeit their share of the inheritance. It was as if he had set up a final test, daring his family to either respect his wishes or risk losing everything. Even the family lawyer, who had worked closely with Hackman for decades, admitted he had no idea what the fund contained, or why Hackman had created it.
The reason the digital information from both of their cell phones is so important, Natasha, is because cell phones can track movement. And that's what they are going to look into. When did those cell phones cease not only to be used, but cease to move?
The public has been equally captivated by the mystery surrounding Gene Hackman's final years. Once a dominant force on the silver screen, he has now become a figure of intrigue, his life a puzzle waiting to be solved. Was he a brilliant strategist? A man who used his wealth to maintain control? Or was he simply a flawed human being, struggling to reconcile his public success with his private failures? As his family continues to peel back the layers of his life, one thing has become clear. His legacy is far more complex than anyone could have imagined, and the story isn't over yet. There is still more to uncover.
So I think I speak for us all when I say, Gene, you'll be remembered for that and for so much more. Rest in peace, my friend.
Just when it seemed the story couldn't get any more complicated, the aftermath of Gene Hackman's passing took an even darker and more dramatic turn. What began as a quiet announcement marking the loss of a Hollywood legend quickly spiraled into a tangled web of family conflicts, hidden agendas, and shocking revelations. The Hackman family, already fractured by years of estrangement, suddenly found themselves thrust into the spotlight, not for Gene's cinematic brilliance, but for the storm of secrets he left behind. At the center of it all was the hidden fortune, and the mysterious fund no one dared to touch. Every revelation only led to more questions, deepening the mystery surrounding his final years. And as the chaos unfolded, one thing became clear. Gene Hackman's story was far from over.
Have investigators been able to get into the obtained cell phones?
Not at this time. We have them in our possession. We'll be analyzing cell phone data, phone calls, text messages, events, photos in the cell phone to try to piece a timeline together.
The news of Gene Hackman's passing arrived with an eerie quietness. It wasn't splashed across every front page, nor did it spark grand tributes from Hollywood's elite. Instead, a small, subdued headline in a local Santa Fe newspaper was the first to break the story. But once word spread, the media frenzy erupted. Reporters dug into every aspect of Hackman's life, searching for clues about his final years. While the public mourned the loss of an acting titan, the Hackman family was left with a far more pressing concern. What had their father been hiding all this time?
As Hollywood gets ready to honor its best at the Academy Awards this weekend, there are still unanswered questions about the death of two-time Oscar winner Gene Hackman and his wife. The couple was found this week in their New Mexico home. On Friday, investigators ruled out carbon monoxide poisoning and revealed other clues that may lead them to determine what did happen.
At first, it seemed like there wouldn't be much to uncover. The will that surfaced shortly after Gene Hackman's passing appeared disappointingly straightforward. A modest house in Santa Fe, a vintage car, and a couple of bank accounts totaling just under $5 million. For a man of Hackman's stature, this was shockingly underwhelming. But it didn't take long for the family to realize they were only scratching the surface. The deeper they dug, the more they uncovered, and it soon became apparent that Hackman had left behind a fortune far greater and far more complicated than anyone had anticipated. The first major revelation came from a dusty wooden chest found in the corner of his Santa Fe home. Inside were stacks of documents, many containing handwritten notes by Hackman himself. Among them were records of investments in obscure ventures, solar energy plants in New Mexico, undeveloped land in Nevada, and even early stakes in tech companies that had since skyrocketed in value. But the real shocker? None of these investments were registered under Hackman's name. Instead, they were tied to a complex web of shell companies, each more impenetrable than the last. This wasn't just a man managing his wealth. It was a masterclass in financial concealment.
His wife, they say that initial findings note no external trauma to either individual. They say that carbon monoxide toxicology reports have been requested. Finally, as sheriff's officials gather information, it's worth pointing out that this could take weeks or months before we know exactly what the cause of this is. That's because these medical examiner cases often take time in order to get to the root cause of these.
And then there was the fund. Hidden among the documents was a single line that sent shockwaves through the family: GH Legacy Fund. No one had ever heard of it before. When the family lawyer was pressed for answers, he could only admit that Hackman had been working on it in secret for decades. The fund was massive, estimated at over $20 million. Yet it was locked behind a series of conditions that made it practically untouchable. Hackman's own notes described it as untouched and untouchable, a phrase that sent chills down the spines of his children. What was this fund for? Why had Hackman gone to such great lengths to keep it hidden, even from his own family?
In order to get that kind of mummification. One of the ways of figuring this out, obviously, is from the scene investigation to find out when did they last pick up the mail, when did they last check in with relatives, phone calls, those kind of things, because people generally will communicate with others during the course of their time. But then you also can use other guides.
The discovery of the fund immediately sparked conflict among Hackman's children. Christopher, the eldest, was the first to voice his frustration. During a tense family meeting, he reportedly told their lawyer, "He never trusted us. He's still controlling everything, even after he's gone." Elizabeth, on the other hand, seemed more heartbroken than angry. Holding one of her father's unsent letters, she was overheard saying, "Why wouldn't he just talk to us? Why did he shut us out?" The letters themselves became another source of anguish. There were dozens of them, written over the span of 30 years, each one offering a glimpse into Hackman's inner thoughts. Yet, none of them had ever been sent. Instead, they were left behind like breadcrumbs, as if Hackman had wanted his family to piece together the puzzle of his life only after he was gone.
There was a dog who was alive in the house and a dog also that belonged to them who was outside the house.
Right, but the door being ajar means, what Judy describes, which is they could have been there 10 days or 2 weeks, meant that the dogs could have had access to come in and out of that doorway. They might have had access to food and to water.
The family's search for answers took them back to Hackman's Santa Fe home, where they combed through every corner for more clues. During the search, they stumbled upon what would be the most shocking discovery: a handwritten letter addressed to the other Gene. At first, they assumed it was just another unsent letter, but upon closer inspection, it became clear this was something entirely different. The letter outlined Hackman's plans for an anonymous charity that would receive a significant portion of his fortune. The charity, named the Other Gene, was meant to fund scholarships and build schools for underprivileged children. In the letter, Hackman wrote, "I've spent my life pretending to be someone I'm not. This is my way of giving back, of being the person I wish I could have been." For his children, this revelation was bittersweet. On one hand, it was proof of their father's generosity and his desire to make a difference. On the other, it was yet another reminder of how little they had truly known him. "He was always so distant," Elizabeth later confided to a close friend. "Even when he was in the room, He felt a million miles away. I guess this was his way of trying to make it right. But it's hard to feel comforted by something we didn't even know existed. The existence of the Other Gene charity also raised new questions about Hackman's financial dealings. If so much of his wealth was tied up in this fund, what did that mean for the rest of his estate? And why had he chosen to keep it a secret from his family? Some speculated that excluding his children from the charity was Hackman's way of forcing them to forge their own paths, free from the shadow of his fame. Others believed it was a form of penance, a way for him to atone for the mistakes he believed he had made as a father. Whatever the reason, the discovery of the charity added yet another layer of complexity to Hackman's already enigmatic legacy.
Mean for certain that carbon monoxide as the cause of can be ruled out. In certain situations, especially when it comes to delayed discovery, post-mortem carbon monoxide levels can be unreliable in general.
As weeks turned into months, the Hackman family found themselves entangled in legal battles over the estate. The GH Legacy Fund, with its strict conditions and mysterious origins, became the focal point of these disputes. Christopher, who had always felt overshadowed by his father's success, was particularly vocal in his opposition to the fund's restrictions. "I'm not saying I deserve all of it," he reportedly told a family friend, "but I deserve to know the truth. We all do." Elizabeth, on the other hand, took a more measured approach, focusing her energy on deciphering the unsent letters and unfinished manuscripts left behind by her father. Among these was a partially completed memoir, which Hackman had titled The Last Confession. In it, he wrote, "I've always been better at playing other people than being myself. Maybe that's why I've always been so afraid of letting people in." In the end, the story of Gene Hackman's final years is one of contradictions. He was a man who achieved unparalleled success, but struggled with the weight of his own legacy. A father who loved his children, but couldn't find the words to tell them. A philanthropist who gave generously to strangers while keeping his own family at arm's length. His passing left behind more questions than answers, and for his family, the journey to uncover the truth is far from over. What secrets remain hidden in the labyrinth of his life? Will the Hackman family ever find closure? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates on this developing story. Until next time, take care. And remember to hold your loved ones close. You never know how much time you have left to make those connections count.